the architect of her own triumph. Part 1: The Betrayal. The first signs of trouble had been there for months, but Elena Sokolova had dismissed them. Small things: Robert taking private calls in the hallway, meetings mysteriously rescheduled when she was with clients, documents moved on her desk. She'd attributed it all to the growing pains of their expanding architectural visualization firm, Sokolova Design, a name she'd fought for when Robert insisted it should be Sullivan and Sokolova. "Your name has that exotic Russian flair," he'd said with that smile that charmed clients but always left Elena slightly cold. "It's marketable." Now, standing in line at Blue Bottle Coffee on Newberry Street, Elena stared at her phone in disbelief, the Instagram post burning into her retinas. There was Robert, her business partner of 5 years, smiling broadly at the camera, his arms slung around the shoulders of Vincent Mercer, CEO of Axiom Ventures. The caption read, "Thrilled to announce Sokolova Design's acquisition by Axiom. Looking forward to leading our expanded design division. #new chapter #Axiom family." Except there was no "our" anymore. And Elena had heard nothing about an acquisition. She immediately dialed Robert's number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. And again. 6 calls in total, all ignored. The knot in her stomach tightened with each unanswered ring. By the time she reached the counter, Elena's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped her credit card. "Americano, please," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. The barista, a young woman with vibrant blue hair, gave her a concerned look but didn't comment. Elena moved to the pickup area, refreshing her email obsessively. Finally, 20 minutes after seeing the post, a notification appeared. From Robert Sullivan. The subject line: "Axiom acquisition, your severance package." The temperature in the coffee shop seemed to drop 20 degrees as she opened the email. Elena. As you've likely seen, Sokolova Design is being acquired by Axiom Ventures. This represents a tremendous opportunity for the company we built together. The terms are exceptional, far beyond what we might have hoped for at this stage. Asterisk. I've reviewed our partnership agreement carefully. Section 7.3 gives me final authority on acquisition offers exceeding $5 million. Axiom's offer is $8.2 million. I've exercised my right to accept. Asterisk. Regarding your role. Axiom was explicit that they wish to streamline leadership. Only one design principal will transition to their team. Based on client feedback and portfolio evaluation, they've selected me for this position. Asterisk. Your services will no longer be required effective immediately, but you'll receive a generous severance package of $1.75 million, reflecting your ownership stake. All company assets, including client relationships and design methodologies developed during your employment, will transfer to Axiom as part of the sale. Asterisk. I've instructed our attorney to prepare the necessary paperwork. You'll need to sign a non-compete agreement covering the northeastern United States for a period of 2 years. Asterisk. I'd hoped to discuss this in person, but given the accelerated timeline Axiom demanded, this email must suffice. Regards, Robert. Ms. Sokolova? The barista's voice pulled her from her shocked daze. Your Americano's ready. Elena nodded mechanically, gathering her coffee and stepping outside into the crisp Boston air. 5 years of work. Her innovative architectural visualizations. Her client relationships. All of it gone. She walked without direction, barely noticing her surroundings until she found herself at the Charles River Esplanade. She sat heavily on a bench, the spring breeze carrying the scent of new growth and possibility. A cruel contrast to the collapse of everything she'd built. Her phone buzzed. A text from Robert. I tried to tell you in person. Axiom only wants one design lead, and frankly they were more impressed with my portfolio. The buyout check will clear your account Monday. Enough to take a year off. No hard feelings. The rage that surged through Elena nearly made her drop her coffee. No hard feelings. He had been systematically taking credit for her work for months. Those projects in his portfolio were largely her designs, her innovations. The Hartwell Museum visualization that had won industry acclaim? Her weekend work while Robert was sailing in Martha's Vineyard. The Morgan Financial headquarters that had landed them 3 more corporate clients? Her concept from start to finish. Instead of responding, Elena took several deep breaths, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water's surface. Below, she knew they were paddling furiously, just as her mind was now racing beneath her composed exterior. Elena had come to America 10 years ago with nothing but her architecture degree and determination. Her parents back in St. Petersburg had scraped together every ruble they had to help her get established. Her father had died 2 years later, never seeing how she'd eventually flourished. She'd proven herself over and over in a field dominated by men like Robert Sullivan, with their Harvard connections and family money. She wasn't about to let him push her out of what she'd built. She pulled out her notebook, the old-fashioned paper kind she still preferred for her initial sketches, and began to write, her handwriting growing steadier with each word. By the time the sun began to set, casting long golden reflections across the Charles, Elena had the outline of a plan. It wasn't complete, but it was a start. She stood, straightened her jacket, and walked with purpose toward her apartment in Back Bay. There would be no sleeping tonight. He had work to do. Elena's loft apartment, usually meticulously organized, was now covered in papers. Contracts, design sketches, email printouts, and legal documents spread across every available surface. For 36 hours straight, she had been digging through 5 years of business records, stopping only for brief naps and coffee. What she found both infuriated and emboldened her. Robert had indeed been clever. The partnership agreement did give him final say on acquisition offers over $5 million, a clause she'd agreed to when they were struggling to pay rent on their first office, and such a figure seemed like a distant dream. But there were other clauses, details he might have overlooked. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Former employees confused about the acquisition announcement. Clients worried about their projects. Elena let most calls go to voicemail, but when Diane Chen's name appeared on her screen, she answered immediately. Diane had been their first major client, an influential developer who had taken a chance on them when Sokolova Design was operating out of Elena's living room. "Elena, what the hell is going on? I just got a call from some Axiom account manager telling me they're taking over my River Point project." Elena closed her eyes. "It's complicated, Diane. Robert sold the company without my consent." "Without your, can he do that?" "Legally, yes. Ethically, that's another question." Elena hesitated. "How do you feel about the acquisition?" "I didn't hire Axiom. I hired you. Your visualization style is what sold our investors on the project." There was a pause. "They're saying you're out completely?" "That's what they're saying." "Bullshit," Diane said flatly. "Let me make some calls. And Elena? Don't sign anything yet." After hanging up, Elena returned to her research with renewed focus. By Sunday evening, she had compiled enough documentation to make an appointment with Patricia Zhang, an attorney recommended by a former classmate from architecture school. Monday 9 a.m., Patricia's assistant had confirmed. "Bring everything you have." That night, Elena finally allowed herself a proper meal and a few hours of sleep. As she drifted off, her last thought was of her mother's favorite saying, "Patience and hard work overcome everything." She would need both in abundance for what came next. The offices of Zhang and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown tower with views of Boston Harbor. Elena arrived early, dressed in her most authoritative outfit, a charcoal suit with a crimson silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a precise bun. Patricia Zhang proved to be younger than Elena had expected, perhaps in her late 30s, but her reputation as a fearsome intellectual property attorney was immediately apparent. She listened without interruption as Elena explained the situation, her expression revealing nothing. When Elena finished, Patricia leaned back in her chair. "The partnership agreement does give him the right to accept the acquisition offer," she confirmed, looking up from the documents. "But there's something he's overlooked." A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "The IP rights to your specific design methodologies and visualization techniques. According to this clause you insisted on, they remain yours personally, not the company's." Elena leaned forward. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that while Robert can sell the company, he can't sell your proprietary methods. They're going to discover they've bought a design firm without its most valuable assets." Patricia's smile widened. "And from what you've shown me, these innovations are what attracted Axiom in the first place." For the first time in days, Elena felt a spark of hope. "So what do we do?" First, we document everything. Every design where you used these methods. Every email where Robert referenced them as your techniques. I notice you've already started gathering this material. She gestured to Elena's meticulously organized portfolio. Next, we need to establish the timeline of development. Can you prove you created these methods before forming the partnership with Robert? Elena nodded. I have my original notebooks from graduate school where I first started developing the approach. And my thesis project used an early version of the same techniques. Perfect. We'll need all of that. Patricia made some notes. Then we wait for the acquisition to complete. Once Axiom realizes what they're missing, they'll come to you. But we'll be negotiating from a position of strength. Elena felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. What about the non-compete agreement? Don't sign it, Patricia said firmly. Robert needs your signature on that separately from the acquisition. Without it, you're free to work wherever you choose. Given what we know about the IP situation, I'd advise against signing anything he sends your way. As Elena gathered her materials to leave, Patricia added, one more thing. Start documenting every client interaction you've had. Personal relationships, specific projects where you were the primary contact. Anything that proves the clients were working with you, not just the company. Elena nodded. I can do that. Good. Now I should warn you, this won't be quick or easy. Robert and Axiom will fight back when they realize what's happening. Are you prepared for that? Elena thought of the text message. No hard feelings. She thought of the years of work, the nights and weekends sacrificed to build something meaningful. She thought of her father who never got to see her success, and her mother who had taught her to stand her ground. I'm prepared, she said, her voice steady. Whatever it takes. The $1.75 million appeared in Elena's account on Monday as promised. She left it untouched. The same day, she received a package of legal documents from Robert's attorney, including the non-compete agreement. Following Patricia's advice, she filed these away without signing. For the next week, Elena worked methodically, building her case. She retrieved her graduate thesis and notebooks from storage. She organized hundreds of emails and design files showing the evolution of her visualization techniques. She reached out to former professors who could attest to her early development of these methods. Meanwhile, the acquisition proceeded with much fanfare. Boston's business journals celebrated Robert's visionary leadership that had attracted such a prestigious buyer. A feature in Boston Business Monthly included a photo of Robert shaking hands with Vincent Mercer in front of Sokolova Design's logo, which would soon be replaced. The article quoted Robert. This acquisition validates what we've built over the past 5 years. Our unique approach to architectural visualization has revolutionized how clients experience designs before breaking ground. Elena's jaw tightened every time she saw him using the plural, erasing her contribution with each carefully worded statement. She didn't respond publicly. Instead, she continued her meticulous preparation while meeting with Patricia every few days to refine their strategy. The key, Patricia explained, is timing. We don't make any moves until they realize what they're missing. Let them discover the problem on their own. They didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks after the acquisition closed, Elena received a call from Marcus Bowen, the project manager for Clearwater Development, one of their largest clients. Elena, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you. Marcus sounded stressed. The new team at Axiom just delivered preliminary designs for the Riverview project, and frankly, they're garbage. Nothing like what you showed us in the initial presentation. The stakeholders are furious. Elena kept her voice neutral. I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus. Unfortunately, I'm no longer with the company. That's what they told us, but these new designs, they're missing that special quality. That thing you do with light and perspective that makes the spaces feel real. Is there any way you could consult on this? Even unofficially. I'm afraid that would be complicated given the circumstances of my departure, Elena said carefully. But I appreciate you reaching out. After hanging up, she immediately called Patricia to report the conversation. It's starting, Patricia said with satisfaction. Document everything he said as close to verbatim as you can remember. This is exactly what we were waiting for. The next day, similar calls came from 2 more clients. By the end of the week, Elena had documented complaints from 5 major accounts representing over 60% of Sokolova Design's annual revenue. When her phone rang with an unrecognized number late Friday afternoon, Elena wasn't entirely surprised to hear Vincent Mercer's voice. "Miss Sokolova," he said without preamble. "I believe we need to talk." Part 2: The Strategy. The meeting was set for Monday morning at Axiom's gleaming downtown offices. Elena spent the weekend preparing with Patricia, anticipating every possible scenario and crafting responses for each. They role-played the meeting repeatedly, with Patricia taking on the persona of an increasingly frustrated Vincent Mercer. "Remember," Patricia said as their Sunday session concluded, "they'll try to intimidate you. They'll start with charm, then move to threats. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and let them realize slowly that you hold the stronger position." Monday dawned clear and bright. Elena dressed with particular care, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence without ostentation, minimal jewelry save for her grandmother's antique gold earrings that had survived the Soviet era, a reminder of the resilience in her blood. Elena arrived at Axiom's headquarters 15 minutes early. The receptionist, clearly expecting her, led her to a glass-walled conference room with sweeping views of the city. She took a seat facing the door, arranged her materials precisely, and waited. 10 minutes later, the door swung open and Robert walked in, stopping abruptly when he saw her. The color drained from his face. "Elena," he managed. "What are you doing here?" "Mr. Mercer invited me," she replied calmly, taking a seat directly across from him. "I wasn't informed." "No." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "How interesting." Before Robert could respond, Vincent Mercer entered with two other executives, Axiom's CFO Marissa Williams and their legal counsel James Taylor, according to the introductions. Vincent, a tall man with silver hair and the lean physique of a dedicated runner, took control of the room immediately. After brief pleasantries, he got straight to the point. "Miss Sokolova, we seem to have a situation. Several clients are unhappy with our recent work, claiming it doesn't match what they've come to expect from your former company." "I'm not surprised," Elena said, opening her portfolio. The visualization techniques and design methodology that made Sokolova Design distinctive were my personal intellectual property, not company assets. Here's the documentation. She slid copies of the legal paperwork across the table, including the IP agreements and the specific clause in the partnership agreement. Each document was tabbed and highlighted, making the relevant sections immediately apparent. "This is ridiculous," Robert sputtered, his composure slipping. "Those methods were developed as part of company work." "Actually," Elena countered, her voice level, "as these dated sketchbooks and development notes show, I began developing these techniques during my master's program at MIT, 3 years before our partnership. I brought them into the company but retained ownership." "You signed off on this, Robert." She pushed another document his way. "Right here." She watched as Vincent and his team reviewed the materials. Robert's face had gone from red to ashen as he flipped through the pages, recognizing his own signature on agreements he had clearly never read carefully. The room fell silent except for the occasional rustle of paper. Finally, Vincent looked up, his expression unreadable. "It appears," he said slowly, measuring each word, "that we've acquired a company without its most valuable assets." He fixed Robert with a cold stare. "Assets you led us to believe were included." Robert began a defensive ramble about team efforts and shared development, but Elena could see the executives weren't buying it. Marissa, the CFO, was whispering urgently to James, the legal counsel, who was taking rapid notes. "Miss Sokolova," Vincent turned to her, cutting off Robert's increasingly desperate explanations. "I assume you didn't come here just to point out our mistake. What are you proposing?" Elena smiled slightly. "I've prepared 2 options." She distributed another set of documents. "Option 1 is a licensing agreement for my methodologies. Quite expensive, but it would allow you to deliver what you promised your clients." "How expensive?" Marissa asked, flipping directly to the numbers. $2 million annually, plus a 5% royalty on all projects utilizing my techniques, Elena replied. Robert made a choking sound. "That's extortion." Vincent silenced him with a look before turning back to Elena. "And option 2? You hire me as Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to you with equity compensation and complete creative control over all visualization projects." Robert shot to his feet. This is blackmail. This is business, Vincent corrected him, never taking his eyes off Elena. Please continue, Ms. Sokolova. My terms are detailed in the proposal. I would bring my techniques and client relationships. In return, I want appropriate recognition and compensation. She paused deliberately. And Robert would report to me on all creative aspects of our projects. The silence that followed was deafening. This is insane, Robert finally said, his voice hoarse. Vincent, you can't seriously be considering this. We can develop new techniques. Can we? Vincent asked sharply. Before Clearwater pulls their contract? Before Market Street Development takes their business elsewhere? These accounts represent millions in annual revenue. I need time to review these options with my team, Vincent said to Elena. How quickly do you need an answer? I understand you need to discuss this internally, Elena replied. But I should mention that I've received several inquiries from your competitors who've heard I'm available. I haven't pursued those conversations out of professional courtesy, but I can't delay indefinitely. This wasn't strictly true. While Elena had received a few tentative messages from industry contacts, no formal offers had materialized. But Vincent didn't need to know that. 48 hours, Vincent decided. We'll have an answer for you by Wednesday morning. As they stood to conclude the meeting, Vincent addressed her once more. You've clearly put considerable thought into this, Ms. Sokolova. I respect thoroughness. Elena gathered her materials. One develops certain habits when building a company from nothing, Mr. Mercer. Attention to detail is essential for survival. She left without looking at Robert. The next 48 hours were excruciating. Elena alternated between confidence in her strategy and waves of anxiety. What if Vincent called her bluff? What if they decided to develop new techniques and weather the temporary client dissatisfaction? She distracted herself by sketching new design concepts and taking long walks along the Charles River. During one such walk, her phone rang. Diane Chen again. I hear you met with Axiom yesterday, Diane said without preamble. Elena stopped walking. News travels fast. It's a small industry. How did it go? They're considering their options, Elena replied cautiously. Well, I thought you should know that I told Vincent Mercer yesterday that Clearwater would be pulling all our business if they couldn't deliver the quality we originally signed up for. There was a smile in Diane's voice. I may have mentioned that several other developers were asking about who did our River Point visualizations, and that I'd be happy to make introductions to the actual talent behind them. Elena felt a rush of gratitude. Diane, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. What Robert did was unconscionable. Besides, it's just good business. I want the best for my projects, and that's you. Diane paused. Have you thought about what you'll do if Axiom doesn't agree to your terms? I have a few ideas, Elena said, although in truth her backup plans were far from concrete. Well, add this to your considerations. If things don't work out with Axiom, Clearwater would be interested in having you as our exclusive visualization partner. We have enough projects to keep you busy, and I'd introduce you to my network. The offer took Elena by surprise. Thank you. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, it's self-interest. I recognize talent when I see it. Diane's tone turned businesslike. Let me know what happens with Axiom. Either way, we should talk. The conversation left Elena feeling more centered. Whatever happened with Axiom, she had options. Her work spoke for itself, and that mattered more than Robert's betrayal. When Wednesday morning arrived, Elena was calm. The call came precisely at 9 a.m. Ms. Sokolova, Vincent's assistant said, Mr. Mercer would like to meet with you today at 11. Is that convenient? Yes, Elena replied. I'll be there. She called Patricia immediately. They want another meeting, she reported. Today at 11. Good sign, Patricia said. If it was a rejection, they'd probably just call. Come by my office on your way. We should review the employment contract one more time. Vincent Mercer was alone in the conference room when Elena arrived. She noted the absence of Robert with interest. Thank you for coming, Ms. Sokolova, Vincent said, gesturing to a chair. I'll get straight to the point. We've decided to accept your second proposal with some modifications. He slid a document across the table. The position would be Executive Creative Director rather than Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me. The equity arrangement is as you proposed, and you would have creative authority over all visualization projects. Elena glanced at the document, then back at Vincent. And Robert. Mr. Sullivan will be transitioning to a new role focusing on client acquisition, where his networking skills can be valuable. He will consult with your team on creative matters but will not have approval authority. Elena allowed herself a moment to savor this. Robert relegated to a glorified sales position. It was more than she had dared to hope for. There is one additional condition, Vincent continued. A 6-month probationary period, after which both parties can re-evaluate the arrangement. Elena had anticipated this. I'd like a guarantee that my intellectual property rights revert to me completely if either party terminates after the probationary period. Vincent nodded. That seems reasonable. I'll have legal add that clause. Then I believe we have an agreement, Elena said, extending her hand. As they shook hands, Vincent seemed to study her with new respect. When Robert first approached us about acquisition, he presented himself as the creative force behind Sokolova Design. It was only during due diligence that we began to see inconsistencies in that narrative. Yet you proceeded with the acquisition, Elena observed. Vincent shrugged slightly. Business involves risk. Sometimes you discover hidden liabilities, sometimes hidden assets. He smiled thinly. In this case, we've managed to correct course. I look forward to seeing what you can do with Axiom's resources behind you. Where is Robert today? Elena asked, unable to resist. Taking a few personal days to adjust to the new arrangement. He was not particularly receptive to our decision. Elena could well imagine the scene. Robert, accustomed to getting his way through charm and connections, suddenly facing the consequences of his actions. When would you like me to start? She asked. How's Monday? That will give legal time to finalize the paperwork and HR time to prepare. As Elena left Axiom's offices, she felt a strange mixture of vindication and anticlimax. She had won, or at least secured a favorable compromise. Yet there was no triumphant confrontation with Robert, no moment where he was forced to acknowledge what he'd done. Maybe that wasn't the point, she realized. This wasn't about forcing Robert to see the error of his ways. It was about ensuring that her work, her vision, and her future remained in her own hands. She pulled out her phone and called Patricia with the news. Congratulations, the attorney said warmly. You've turned a potential disaster into a major opportunity. Not many people could have managed that. I had excellent counsel, Elena replied. You had determination and foresight, Patricia corrected her. Most importantly, you had the discipline to document and protect your work from the beginning. That made all the difference. After hanging up, Elena walked to the waterfront and found a bench overlooking the harbor. The spring air was warming, carrying the promise of summer. Boats moved across the water, leaving temporary wakes that quickly vanished. She thought about calling her mother with the news but decided to wait until everything was finalized. Better to tell the complete story of her victory once all the papers were signed. For now, it was enough to sit quietly and watch the city she had made her home, knowing that her place in it was secure, not by anyone's gift or favor but by her own tenacity and talent. The work ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance from Robert, skepticism from some at Axiom, the challenge of integrating her methods into a larger corporate structure. But for the first time since seeing that Instagram post, Elena felt the future opening before her rather than collapsing around her. She sent a quick text to Diane. Accepted position as Executive Creative Director at Axiom. Complete creative control. Thank you for your support. It made all the difference. Diane's response came moments later. Knew you'd land on your feet. Let's celebrate soon. P.S. Can't wait to see Robert's face at the next industry event. Elena smiled. That was something to look forward to indeed. Part 3. The Ascension. The first month at Axiom tested Elena in ways she hadn't anticipated. The corporate culture was vastly different from the startup environment she had co-created with Robert. Meetings required calendar invitations. Expense reports needed approval. Design decisions went through committees. But she adapted quickly, identifying key allies and establishing a distinct identity for her team within the larger organization. She insisted on renaming their division Axiom Visualization Innovation, rather than Axiom Design Division, as Robert had planned. It was a subtle distinction but an important one, establishing that her team was bringing something new to the company, not simply being absorbed by it. Her first challenge was the Clearwater project. Diane had been patient but her investors were not. Elena assembled a small team of designers who had worked with her previously at Sokolova Design, bringing them on as contractors initially while she assessed their fit with Axiom. "Your job," she told them during their first meeting, "is to remind everyone why our visualization approach is exceptional. We have 6 weeks to deliver something that will silence the skeptics." They worked relentlessly, applying Elena's methodology with a freedom they hadn't experienced under Robert's management. When Elena presented the results to Vincent and the executive team, the response was immediate. "This is extraordinary," Vincent said, walking around the holographic display where the Clearwater development seemed to rise from the table, light and shadow playing across its surfaces in a way that made the unbuilt structure feel alive. "The way you've captured how the light changes throughout the day. I feel like I'm standing inside the building." "That's precisely the effect we aim for," Elena explained. "Traditional architectural visualization shows what a building will look like. Our approach communicates how it will feel to inhabit the space." When Diane saw the final presentation, her approval was equally enthusiastic. "This is exactly what I needed," she said, examining the visualization from different angles. "The investors will love this. You've elevated it beyond even your previous work." Clearwater signed a new 3-year contract with Axiom the following week. 2 more major clients followed suit. By the end of Elena's second month, her team had secured commitments that would generate over $12 million in revenue. Robert, meanwhile, had returned to work but remained conspicuously distant. His office was in another wing of the building and he focused on courting new business. Achieving some success, Elena had to admit, though she noticed that his sales pitches now prominently featured "our innovative visualization techniques," without specifying whose techniques they were. She encountered him occasionally in meetings or the hallway. Their interactions were coolly professional. No acknowledgement of their history, no reference to his betrayal or her countermove. But Elena noticed how his eyes would narrow slightly when Vincent praised her work, how his smile would tighten when clients specifically requested her involvement in their projects. 3 months into her role, Elena received an email from Vincent requesting a private meeting. Such invitations were no longer unusual. They met regularly to discuss projects and strategy, but something in the wording made her suspect this was different. Her suspicion was confirmed when she arrived at Vincent's office to find both Marissa Williams, the CFO, and James Taylor, the legal counsel, already seated. "Elena," Vincent said, using her first name as he had begun doing recently, "please sit down. We have some news that affects you directly." Her mind immediately raced to worst-case scenarios. Was Axiom being acquired? Were they eliminating her position despite her success? "Robert Sullivan has resigned," Vincent said without preamble. "Effective immediately." Elena kept her expression neutral with effort. "I see. May I ask why?" Vincent and Marissa exchanged glances. It was Marissa who answered. "We've discovered some financial irregularities during his tenure at Sokolova Design. Nothing criminal," she added quickly, "but concerning enough that we initiated an internal audit. When we informed Robert of our findings, he chose to resign rather than face a formal review." "What kind of irregularities?" Elena asked, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. James Taylor cleared his throat. "Primarily inflated expenses and misdirected client payments. Small amounts individually, but they add up over time. We estimate approximately $175,000 over 3 years." Elena felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her. All those times Robert had handled the finances, insisting he was better with numbers. All those expenses he'd submitted for client entertainment, travel, software licenses. Had he been systematically skimming from their company all along? "I had no idea," she said quietly. "We don't believe you did," Vincent assured her. "The patterns began well before the acquisition and were deliberately structured to evade normal oversight. Robert was quite sophisticated in his approach." "Does this affect the acquisition agreement?" Elena asked, thinking of the complex legal structure that now governed her role and compensation. "No," James replied. "The agreement stands. In fact, given the circumstances, we'd like to propose some adjustments to your position." Vincent leaned forward. We'd like to remove the probationary clause from your contract and make your position permanent immediately. Additionally, we want to expand your role to include oversight of all design operations, not just visualization. That would mean a significant increase in responsibility, Marissa added. And compensation, of course. We've prepared a proposal. She handed Elena a folder. Elena opened it to find a detailed outline of a new position. Chief Design Officer, reporting directly to Vincent, with a substantial equity package and authority over all design-related decisions across the firm. This is very generous, she said carefully. It's strategic, Vincent corrected. Your division has outperformed every projection. Clients specifically request you by name. The techniques you've brought to Axiom have given us a competitive advantage that's translated directly to the bottom line. Marissa can show you the numbers if you'd like. I'd appreciate that, Elena said, still processing this unexpected turn of events. As Marissa walked her through the financial impact of her team's work, Elena found herself thinking not of the numbers but of Robert. Had the pressure of maintaining his facade finally become too much? Or had he simply calculated that resignation was preferable to the humiliation of a formal investigation? Either way, his departure marked the final severing of their connection, and the complete collapse of his attempt to take what she had built. We'd like to announce the reorganization next week, Vincent was saying. Assuming you accept the offer. Elena refocused on the conversation. I'd like to review the details with my attorney, but in principle, yes. I'm interested. Vincent smiled. Excellent. One more thing. We're considering renaming the division. Sokolova Innovation has a nice ring to it, don't you think? A nod to the firm's origins while looking forward. Elena couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Robert had erased her from the company they built together, only for her name to become even more prominently featured after his departure. I'd be honored, she said simply. The announcement of Sokolova Innovation as Axiom's premier design division made the front page of the architecture and business press. The story focused on Elena's unique visualization techniques and her rapid rise within Axiom, with only a brief mention of Robert's departure to pursue other opportunities. Congratulatory messages poured in from colleagues, clients, and former employees. Even competitors reached out, some with thinly veiled job offers, others with genuine admiration for her resilience. The most meaningful message came from her mother, who had finally mastered video calling at the age of 65. Her face, lined with the experiences of a life lived under Soviet rule and through Russia's turbulent transition, filled Elena's screen one evening. I saw the news online, she said in Russian, her voice crackling slightly over the connection. My daughter, a chief officer in an American company. Your father would have been so proud. Elena smiled, feeling the familiar pang whenever her father was mentioned. I wish he could have seen it. He sees, her mother said with the simple certainty of her generation. Now tell me, this man who betrayed you, he is finished? Yes, Mama. He's gone. Her mother nodded with satisfaction. Good. In my life I have learned that people who betray others eventually betray themselves. It is the way of things. She leaned closer to the camera. But you, my Elenochka, you have not just survived, you have flourished. This is the true victory. Elena nodded, unexpectedly moved by her mother's perspective. It wasn't about Robert's downfall, satisfying as that might be. It was about her own ascension. In the months that followed, Sokolova Innovation expanded rapidly. Elena hired selectively, building a team of designers who shared her vision and standards. She established a mentorship program for young architects, remembering her own struggles as an immigrant trying to break into the field. She occasionally heard rumors about Robert, consulting work in Chicago, a failed startup attempt in San Francisco, a teaching position at a second-tier design school. Each time she acknowledged the information without comment and returned her focus to her own path. 6 months after her promotion, Sokolova Innovation was selected as a finalist for the American Architectural Visualization Award, the industry's highest recognition. The nomination recognized their work on an ambitious museum project that used Elena's techniques to allow visitors to experience how the space would interact with exhibited art before construction even began. The awards ceremony was held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, gathering the elite of the architectural world. Elena wore a simple black dress with a structural aspect to its design, architectural fashion as she thought of it. As she sat with her team waiting for the announcement, she spotted Robert across the room. He was seated at a side table, accompanied by people she didn't recognize from a firm she hadn't heard of. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small, tight nod, which she returned with equal restraint. And the winner for most innovative firm in architectural visualization is. The presenter paused for effect. Sokolova Innovation, a division of Axiom Ventures, for their groundbreaking work on the Barrett Contemporary Art Museum. The applause was thunderous as Elena made her way to the stage. Standing at the podium, award in hand, she looked out at the industry that had become her home, at the team that had helped bring her vision to life, and briefly at Robert, whose expression remained carefully neutral. Innovation isn't just about new technology, she told the audience. It's about resilience. About turning obstacles into opportunities. Her gaze found Robert in the crowd, now relegated to the margins of an industry where he had once expected to dominate. And sometimes it's about standing your ground when others try to take what you've built. She paused, then continued more softly. But more than anything, innovation is about vision, seeing possibilities others miss and having the courage to pursue them. Every person on our team embodies that spirit, and this award belongs to all of them. Thank you. The celebration afterward was joyous. Elena's team, Vincent, and key clients gathered at an exclusive rooftop bar overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Champagne flowed and conversations buzzed with excitement about upcoming projects and possibilities. At one point, Elena stepped away from the group to enjoy a moment of quiet at the railing, taking in the view of the city illuminated against the night sky. Quite a view, came a voice beside her. She turned to find Vincent, champagne glass in hand. It is, she agreed. New York at night. There's nothing quite like it. I meant your journey, Vincent clarified. From nearly being pushed out of your own company to leading our most successful division in less than a year. It's impressive. Elena smiled. I had help along the way. Don't minimize your achievement, Vincent said. What you accomplished took extraordinary skill and courage. I've been in business for 30 years, and I've rarely seen someone navigate such a situation so effectively. Thank you, Elena said simply. I've been meaning to ask, Vincent continued. Did you know? About Robert's financial indiscretions. Elena shook her head. No. He always handled that side of the business. I trusted him. She paused. A mistake, obviously. Perhaps. But trust isn't the mistake. Trusting the wrong person is. Vincent sipped his champagne. The question is whether the experience makes you wiser about whom to trust or unable to trust at all. Definitely the former, Elena said without hesitation. I've built a new team I trust completely. And I've learned to verify even when I trust. Vincent nodded approvingly. That's the right balance. Trust with accountability. He gestured toward the party. Your team admires you, you know. Not just for your talent but for your integrity. That's rare and valuable. After Vincent rejoined the others, Elena remained at the railing for a few moments longer. Her phone buzzed with a message from her sister back in Russia. Asterisk saw the live stream. So proud of you. Mom is telling everyone in the neighborhood her daughter just won the American Architecture Prize. Not exactly accurate, but we're letting her enjoy it. Love you. Asterisk. Elena smiled, remembering her mother's favorite saying once again. Patience and hard work overcome everything. As she looked around at the industry peers now eager to speak with her, at the business card in her hand from a venture capitalist interested in funding her next innovation, Elena felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond vindication. Robert had tried to erase her, to take everything she'd built, but in doing so he had only set the stage for her greatest triumph. She had not just reclaimed her place, she had transcended it. And the view from here was beautiful. Part 4. 2 years later. Elena stood in the center of the Barrett Contemporary Art Museum, watching as visitors moved through the space she had helped visualize long before construction began. The towering glass atrium captured light in precisely the way her team had modeled it, creating an ever-changing interplay of illumination and shadow that complemented the exhibited artwork. It's remarkable how accurate your visualizations were, said Julian Barrett, the museum's namesake and primary benefactor, as he joined her. Walking through this space feels exactly like walking through your virtual model 2 years ago. Elena smiled. That's the highest compliment you could give us. I mean it. When we were selecting architects and visualization partners, there were firms with more history, bigger names. But none could show us how the building would feel. He gestured to a family experiencing an interactive art installation nearby. Look at their faces, that sense of wonder, of discovery. You captured that before a single beam was in place. The Barrett Museum had become a landmark project for Sokolova innovation and had spawned a dozen similar commissions. Under Elena's leadership, the division had tripled in size and now accounted for nearly 40% of Axiom's annual revenue. What had begun as a specialized architectural visualization team had expanded to encompass urban planning, exhibition design, and a cutting-edge virtual reality department that allowed clients to literally walk through unbuilt environments. Elena's phone buzzed with a notification. She checked it discreetly, a message from her assistant reminding her about tomorrow's interview with Architectural Digest for their Visionaries issue. Elena would be on the cover, a first for someone specializing in visualization rather than traditional architecture. I should let you continue your tour, Elena told Julian. I have a meeting back at the office. Of course. But before you go, the board has been discussing our next expansion. We'd like Sokolova Innovation to be involved from the very beginning. Something truly experimental this time. We'd be honored, Elena replied. Send over your initial thoughts and we'll schedule a preliminary creative session. As she left the museum and slid into the waiting car, Elena reflected on how much had changed in 2 years. The company that bore her name was now an industry leader, with offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco. The methodologies that Robert had tried to take from her had been refined and expanded, becoming the foundation for a new approach to architectural experience that was transforming how people interacted with the built environment. Vincent had become not just a boss but a mentor, guiding her through the complexities of corporate leadership while giving her the autonomy to pursue her creative vision. 6 months ago he had appointed her to Axiom's board of directors, the youngest member in the company's history. At Axiom's headquarters, Elena took the elevator to the top floor, where Sokolova Innovation occupied the northeast corner with its floor-to-ceiling windows providing panoramic views of the city. The space hummed with creative energy, designers collaborating around digital models, developers coding new visualization tools, project managers coordinating with clients globally. She waved to team members as she passed, stopping occasionally to check on projects or answer questions. This casual, accessible leadership style had become her trademark, a deliberate contrast to the hierarchical approach common in larger firms. In her office, Elena found Patricia Zhang waiting. The attorney who had helped her reclaim her work had become a trusted advisor and friend. Sorry to keep you waiting, Elena said, setting down her bag. I was at the Barrett Museum. How's it looking? Even better than we visualized it, if that's possible. Elena sat down across from Patricia. So, what's the verdict on the patent application? Patricia smiled. Approved. As of this morning, your core visualization methodology is officially patented technology. Any firm wanting to use it will need to license it from Sokolova Innovation. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. This patent represented the culmination of years of work. Not just the technical development, but the legal battle to establish and protect her ownership. That's wonderful news. Thank you for guiding us through the process. It was my pleasure. This is a significant milestone, Elena. You've gone from nearly losing your intellectual property to establishing an internationally recognized patent. Patricia tilted her head slightly. Have you heard the news about Robert, by the way? Elena shook her head. She rarely tracked Robert's activities these days, though occasional information still reached her through industry channels. His latest venture failed, Patricia said. Some kind of design tech startup in Austin. I heard he's looking for teaching positions. Elena absorbed this information without obvious reaction. Robert's downward trajectory had continued over the past 2 years, a series of short-lived jobs and unsuccessful ventures. She felt no pleasure in his struggles but no sympathy either. He had made his choices. I hope he finds something suitable, she said neutrally. Patricia studied her face. You've truly moved beyond it, haven't you? The betrayal, the anger, it's not driving you anymore. Elena considered this. It hasn't driven me for a long time. Initially, yes, proving Robert wrong, showing that I could succeed without him, even surpass him, that motivated me. But at some point I realized I was achieving things that had nothing to do with him or our history. That's the healthiest response I've seen to such a situation, Patricia observed. Most people either remain bitter or try to pretend the injury never happened. You've done neither. After Patricia left, Elena received a video call from her mother in St. Petersburg. Now approaching 70, Elena Sokolova had embraced technology with surprising enthusiasm, especially when it allowed her to see her daughter's life in America. Elenačka, how was the museum opening? Wonderful, Mama. The space is exactly as we envisioned it. I saw pictures online. So much glass. In St. Petersburg, such a building would be impractical. All that snow on the roof. Her mother shook her head with good-humored disapproval. Elena laughed. That's why they have engineers, Mama. They chatted about family matters. Elena's sister's new baby, her mother's book club, plans for Elena's upcoming visit. As they were about to end the call, her mother grew serious. I've been thinking about your father lately, she said. About how proud he would be. Not just of your success but of how you've handled it. With dignity, with generosity. Elena felt the familiar tightness in her throat whenever her father was mentioned. I hope so. I know so. You remember what he always said? Success without character is no success at all. Her mother's eyes, so like Elena's own, held a lifetime of wisdom. You have both, my daughter. That is his legacy in you. After the call ended, Elena walked to the windows of her office, gazing out at the city spread before her. Boston had been her home for 12 years now, longer than she had ever lived anywhere else as an adult. Her journey here, the struggles of immigration, building a career from nothing, the betrayal and subsequent triumph, had shaped her in ways she was still discovering. Her assistant knocked gently on the door. Sorry to interrupt, but the design team is ready for the Chicago presentation whenever you are. I'll be right there, Elena replied. Before leaving her office, she paused at a framed sketch on the wall, her original concept drawing for the visualization technique that had launched her career. Beneath it was a quote she had added recently: "We build our legacy not in spite of our challenges but because of them." In the conference room her team had assembled talented designers and technologists from around the world who had chosen to work with Sokolova Innovation. As Elena entered, the low hum of conversation quieted. "Let's see what we've got for Chicago," she said with a smile, taking her place at the head of the conference table. The team's lead designer, Maya Chin, a brilliant architect Elena had recruited from a competing firm last year, stood to present. With a gesture she activated the room's advanced projection system. The conference room transformed, surrounding them with a three-dimensional model of an ambitious urban renewal project for Chicago's riverfront. "We've revised the approach based on your feedback," Maya explained as virtual buildings rose around them. "Instead of isolated structures, we're proposing an integrated ecosystem where public spaces flow organically between the buildings, creating a continuous experience from the river to the interior plazas." Elena walked through the projection, studying how light played across the surfaces, how pedestrian pathways guided movement, how green spaces provided both beauty and function. This was Sokolova Innovation's most ambitious project yet, not just visualizing a design created by others, but actively shaping the urban fabric of a major American city. "The sustainability elements?" Elena asked, pointing to rooftop features. "Fully integrated," answered Raj Patel, their environmental systems specialist. "Solar collection, rainwater harvesting, and vertical gardens are all functional elements rather than afterthoughts. The system reduces energy consumption by nearly 40% compared to conventional designs." Elena nodded approvingly. "And the community input?" Another team member stepped forward. "We've incorporated feedback from all 12 neighborhood consultations. The revised market spaces reflect local business needs, and we've expanded the cultural center based on community priorities." What had begun as a visualization firm had evolved into something far more comprehensive. A design collective that bridged the gap between architects' visions and human experience, between technical possibilities and social needs. "It's extraordinary work," Elena told the team after the complete presentation. "But I think we can push further on the integration between the riverfront and the interior spaces. The transition still feels abrupt here." She gestured to a section of the model. Let's explore ways to make that boundary more permeable both visually and physically. The team nodded, already considering solutions. This was the culture Elena had cultivated, rigorous standards paired with collaborative problem-solving. No idea was dismissed without consideration, and no design was accepted without scrutiny. After the meeting, Elena's day continued with its typical intensity: client calls, design reviews, a strategic planning session with Vincent. By evening, when most of the staff had departed, Elena remained, sitting at her desk reviewing drawings for an upcoming project in Singapore. A soft knock at her door drew her attention. It was Diane Chin, her first major client and now a close friend. Diane had expanded her development company into one of the most forward-thinking in the country, with a focus on environmentally responsible urban projects. Working late again? Diane asked, settling into a chair across from Elena. Just finishing up. What brings you here? I was in the building for a meeting with Vincent, thought I'd stop by. Diane studied Elena for a moment. The Architectural Digest feature is generating quite a buzz. I've had 3 developers call me asking if you're really as good as the advanced publicity suggests. Elena smiled. And what did you tell them? That you're better, but they should look elsewhere because your team is already booked solid with my projects. Diane's expression grew more serious. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you. Something outside the usual scope of our work together. She explained that her foundation was launching an initiative to develop innovative housing solutions for climate-displaced communities. The challenge was immense: designing adaptable, sustainable shelters that could be rapidly deployed while still providing dignity and quality of life for inhabitants. We need more than just visualization, Diane concluded. We need someone who can reimagine what housing means in an age of climate instability. Someone who can help people see and feel possibilities they've never considered. Elena leaned forward, immediately engaged. This was exactly the kind of challenge that energized her, using design not just for aesthetic or commercial purposes, but as a tool to address urgent human needs. Would Axiom approve such a project? Diane asked. It's not exactly the high-profit work they usually pursue. They will, Elena said confidently. Vincent has given me considerable latitude to direct our focus. Besides, innovations developed for humanitarian applications often lead to breakthroughs in commercial sectors. As they discussed the project's parameters, Elena felt a familiar surge of creative inspiration, the same feeling she'd experienced as a graduate student developing her first visualization techniques, the same drive that had sustained her through building Sokolova design, through Robert's betrayal, through rebuilding her career at Axiom. After Diane left, Elena remained at her desk, sketching initial concepts for the climate resilience project. The challenge resonated with her on a personal level. Her own journey had been one of resilience and adaptation, taking setbacks and transforming them into opportunities, finding strength in displacement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Just heard about the Chicago presentation. Team says it was remarkable. Dinner tomorrow to discuss expansion possibilities? Elena smiled as she replied affirmatively. The message exemplified how far she'd come, from fighting to save her career to discussing how to expand her division's global reach. As she gathered her things to leave, Elena paused at the wall of framed photographs near her office door. They showed completed projects, buildings and spaces her team had helped bring to life through their visualization work. Each represented countless hours of creativity, technical innovation and collaboration. Among them was a small, unassuming frame containing not a photograph but a piece of paper, the original partnership agreement with Robert, with section 7.3 highlighted, the clause he had used to push her out. Elena had kept it not out of bitterness but as a reminder, to read the fine print, to protect what she created, to never again allow her future to rest in someone else's hands. Walking to the elevator, Elena passed a large installation in the office lobby, a dynamic digital display showcasing the firm's work. Currently, it was showing their visualization for the Barrett Museum, transitioning between the early concept model and photographs of the completed building, the remarkable similarity between vision and reality evident to all who viewed it. The display was labeled with a simple phrase Elena had chosen: "We don't just show what could be. We help make it real." Outside, the Boston evening was cool and clear. Instead of taking a car, Elena decided to walk home, following the harbor walk along the waterfront. The city's lights reflected on the dark water, creating a doubled landscape of reality and reflection. She thought about the coming years: the climate resilience project with Diane, the Chicago urban renewal, the planned Asian expansion of Sokolova innovation. Each represented not just professional opportunity but the chance to shape how people experience their built environment, to create spaces that elevated daily life rather than merely containing it. Elena reached her apartment building, a historic structure overlooking the harbor that she had purchased last year, her first major personal investment after years of focusing exclusively on her career. The doorman greeted her warmly as she entered. In her apartment, Elena moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows that had sold her on the space. The view encompassed much of Boston, including several buildings she had helped visualize before they were built. Seeing them now, illuminated against the night sky, part of the city's fabric, gave her a profound sense of connection to this place that had become her home. She thought of Robert briefly, wondering where he was tonight. The last she'd heard, he had taken a position teaching design at a small college in the Midwest. A respectable career, but far from the industry leadership he had once envisioned. Elena felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy at his diminished circumstances, only a quiet recognition that their paths had diverged irrevocably. His choices had led him away from what he'd sought to claim, while hers had carried her beyond what she'd initially fought to reclaim. Her phone chimed with an email notification, the final production draft of the Architectural Digest interview for her approval. The subject line included a quote they'd selected for the cover: Elena Sokolova, visualizing the impossible. It was a good description, she thought, but incomplete. Her work had always been about more than visualization. It was about realization. About turning possibility into actuality. About seeing what could be and creating the path to make it real. In architecture and in life, she had learned, the most enduring structures rose not from untested ground but from the foundations built upon previous challenges. Her greatest innovation hadn't been a specific technique or approach, but the resilience to transform betrayal into opportunity, limitation into expansion, setback into advancement. As Elena prepared for sleep, her thoughts turned to the Architectural Digest photoshoot scheduled for the morning. They wanted to photograph her at the Barrett Museum, standing amid the space she had helped bring into being. It was fitting, a tangible demonstration of her journey from vision to reality. Her last thoughts before drifting off were not of past struggles or future projects, but of her father's words as quoted by her mother: "Success without character is no success at all." In the end, Elena reflected, that had been the essential difference between her path and Robert's. He had sought success at any cost, even betrayal. She had sought to create something of lasting value, something that reflected not just her talent but her principles. The betrayal that had once threatened to destroy her career had instead clarified her purpose. In architecture, as in life, the most powerful statements were not reactions against what had failed but expressions of what could yet be built. Elena Sokolova hadn't just reclaimed what was hers. She had transformed it into something greater than what had existed before. She had become the architect not merely of buildings but of her own triumph.